This episode of What the Force is sponsored by Super Yaki. Check out their amazing movie-inspired merch at superyaki.com. Welcome, everyone, to What the Force, and welcome to our segment, Meta Music. And with me for all of these episodes is Christy Carew. Hi, Christy.
Hello. Hi. Good to see you.
And we have an amazing special guest who we are going to interview all about, Star Wars, the creation of Star Wars music, creation of music in general. Welcome, Will Roget, the composer for Vader Immortal Episode 1. Welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
We're so glad to have you on the show. I've been so excited to have you on here ever since Christy was like, I think I can get it. And I giggled a little bit because I loved Vader Immortal. I loved the music, nice. Especially. And we sat with just episode 1 for so long. And then episode 2 and 3 dropped very, very quickly. So it was very, we've had more time with episode 1. And now with the re-release of it on PlayStation 4, this is a very apropos time to talk to you and talk about Star Wars and to talk about music and all of the things we love, especially on this segment and the show. So welcome. Mm-hmm.
One of the things we also like to talk about on this segment is the future of Star Wars music. And the more I dug into your music for Vader Immortal, for Old Republic, the more I'm like, he is the future of Star Wars music. The more I am just, oh my gosh, I know that there's so many people who are gamers in the fandom who've played this game, but I'm just really excited for the people who aren't necessarily very familiar with the video games to hear this episode, all the people who are crazy about film music and TV music and just media music in general. I'm really excited for them to hear this episode and hear kind of your process and your background. So.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. Yeah.
If you could give us just, a little pitch into your background or talk about your composing background, just to give everybody come up to speed with where we are in your own words, that would be really great.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Philadelphia. I started playing the piano when I was 3 or 4 years old. But what's kind of funny about that is, it was classical piano, learning Chopin, Beethoven, and all that. But I was always keen on improvisation to the point where starting, I think, in middle school or high school or whatever, back when I guess the hormones get going and you start to be lazy, I would not practice the actual pieces that I was supposed to be practicing. And instead, I would create just on the fly pieces that kind of were sound-alikes of the actual work I was supposed to be working on. For me, that was just a lot more fun, that creative process, rather than memorizing by rote what someone else had done 300 years ago. But I never really, even though in the back of my mind I knew I wanted to be a composer even in elementary school, I never really had a sense of what I would do with it until I played Final Fantasy VII in, I guess, my freshman year of high school. I was not really a gamer before that. We just didn't have systems or anything like that. But once I played that game, there's something about the way that Uematsu-san's score was so, I mean, it was brilliantly written, of course, but it was also weirdly inviting. Like, there was something about the PlayStation 1 sound where you could hear pretty much every element individually. And it was almost like a masterclass in how to put music together. And so I could hear all that, and it almost was like it was inviting me to, like, oh, it's something anyone can do. You can do this video game music thing. Come on, just try it. Come on.
That's cool.
One of the first things I started off doing, in addition to composing game music, was transcribing other game music, especially in that PlayStation 1, Super Nintendo era. Back when, again, because of the limitations of the system, it was actually quite easy to pick out every individual part and take it down by ear. You had to remember, this is like right around the turn of the century, so we didn't really have MP3s or anything like that. If you wanted to listen to music from your favorite game, and you didn't have the absurd amount of money that it cost to import the CDs from Japan, you had to listen to like a MIDI file that some basement-dwelling nerd had transcribed note for note by ear. And I was one of those basement-dwelling nerds that transcribed this music. I would get to the point in the game where the song I really liked, I would hit play on, or hit record on my cassette tape player, and then later on I would just take it down note for note from all of these wonderful Japanese role-playing game scores that eventually became so influential in how I write music. So yeah, I did that all throughout high school. I found a lot of indie projects online, different forums and stuff that I was on, and did tons of game scores. Unfortunately, none of them ever actually came out. But, all throughout high school and college, I was just on, one indie score after another that I was just really trying to get into this game music thing. And eventually, after being on like some professional forums and stuff for about 2-3 years, I finally got a chance to work at LucasArts as a music assistant. Yeah, that's kind of where it all sort of started. Star Wars, The Force Unleashed was one of my first projects as a music editor. And then sort of as time went on at LucasArts, I realized that the audio team really needed a lot more help on the technical side. So I taught myself scripting in the game's engine and learned how to do all of that so that we didn't need to rely on other departments to implement the music in the game. And then after I kind of became the technical guy, I really wanted to do original music composition the whole time. And a funny thing happened. So they were working on The Old Republic and some dates got shifted because of like a weird EA thing. And I overheard a conversation, between the audio director and the music supervisor, where it was revealed that they needed an additional composer because there was so much music to be written. I'm pretty sure I was not supposed to overhear that because I remember clearly that, even like multiple times in my first year at LucasArts, I was told like, you will never be writing original music for any of these games. That's not job description, etc. Which I was okay with because I obviously was having a lot of fun doing the technical stuff and the music editing. Yeah. But that very night, I took the bus home, and on the bus, I was sketching out, some idea for a demo piece. I got home, I wrote it, arranged it out and everything. And the next day I kind of forced the music supervisor to listen to it. And long story short, I ended up writing about an hour of music for The Old Republic, including my first time ever writing for a live orchestra and choir.
What?
And that's my sort of how I got into writing original music for games.
That main title that I heard, that segment of it, that was your first time writing for orchestra and choir?
I've written other stuff for The Old Republic before that, but yeah, that was one of my first times writing for a live group.
That's amazing, because I was listening to that and just completely, it rocked my socks off. It was so epic and so
thank you.
Layered with different influences and influences in terms of the era and the atmosphere of the game and that story and that point in Star Wars history, and the way that you perfectly captured that is so evident in the music and the choices that are made. So that's awesome. That's so cool.
Thank you so much. That was a weird one. I really loved working on that piece in particular. I think that it's been so long, so I apologize. I don't remember the character, but they didn't use that as the main theme. They used that as one of the main boss fights, and towards the end, this music kicks in. Again, apologies. I've completely forgotten so much about it. This is like 10 years ago.
It's a long time ago at this point, yeah.
Yeah. One of the funny things looking back on that piece, because I hadn't heard it in a while, is that you can actually hear a lot of my influences from the Japanese RPG titles. Mm-hmm. I was huge into the music of a composer named Hitoshi Sakimoto, who did Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story, two of my absolute favorite game scores. And to me, I can really hear that influence there. And later on, I found out by some friends of his and coworkers of his that apparently he was really big and influenced by Star Wars. So it all kind of came
it's all full
like this
circle.
Weird recycling of ideas and concepts. And that's kind of, I guess, why it ended up working for me.
That's so cool.
What about that music really works well for, the Old Republic as a game?
About you mean
like using the influences from like Final Fantasy and that game genre? I mean, it is RPG setting, right? So that does work.
I guess, I'm not sure. I think, there's this concept that a lot of more theoretical types talk about, like composerly intention, which I would define as when you're doing something that really has nothing to do with what you're writing for. It's just what you thought was cool, and you just kind of incorporate that. And like you can see a lot of like Bulgarian folk influences and all throughout my music, even in the especially in the orchestral stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of like harmony and rhythm sometimes, and it has nothing to do with like there's no reason for it. It's just what I think is cool.
Just sounds right.
It just, it doesn't even sound right. It's just like, I just thought, I thought it was neat, so I just did it.
But there's something about intuition too, right? Like,
sure, yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Hey. Yeah, because creativity doesn't always be like, it isn't always like, I planned this all out. Sometimes it's, this just feels right? So,
Any composer who ever tells you that everything they do is planned out and intentional is a wonderful liar. Maybe they're even lying to themselves. I don't know. But so much of what we do is we just thought it was cool, so we did it.
We followed that thread. Like a new thread came into it and we said, oh, that's kind of cool. You just follow where it takes you.
Absolutely.
Not knowing beforehand necessarily.
Yeah, and the skill is like, making even a mistake sometimes and then rolling with it, seeing where it takes you and understanding like, okay, well, let's go with this. Maybe let's rein this in and just kind of having that balance, I think.
Totally.
I love that this all came kind of from you having an ear and like hearing the different parts of the music and then kind of being like, oh, I can break this down and then build it back up with its own building blocks. And, I see that a lot in different Star Wars creators in that like they see something that they like in a different genre or a different type of film, and they take that and they use it as a building block for what they're creating.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the great things about Star Wars is that it's a whole universe.
Yeah.
And even in just the music itself, like the thing I tell people always ask me like, oh, does it feel restricting to work on Star Wars music? And the answer is no, because there's very little that you can do with an orchestra that hasn't already been done by John Williams. 9 Star Wars films that he's done at this point?
Yeah.
Plus a main theme for Solo, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like it's not really about exclusion. It's not like you can't do this, you can't do that, or whatever. I mean, there are some little rules here and there, but they're not that restrictive. And now that we have Mandalorian, some of those rules are now out the window as well. So like it's more about like sounding like Star Wars and fitting into the universe and all that. It's more about incorporating certain things, certain little Williamsy elements, kind of spicing your music up with those, rather than saying like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, or whatever.
It's like
that makes a lot of sense.
Like Christy and I talk a lot on this segment about using the harmonic language in a way that it means something. Like dark side themes kind of sound very similar. If you're using certain types of instruments, it creates a certain feel, and that's more in line with Williams, or using, themes to mean characters also is very Williams.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And we talk about it as the musical sandbox, and we talk about like especially with The Mandalorian, adding all of this different type of sand and things that can be used in the musical sandbox outside of what Williams created. And like John Powell did that with Solo, and we like finding these like new, I don't know, tools that people are adding in to play with.
Yeah.
It's fun. So what was your first experience with Star Wars, and like how did you become a fan? Was it like before or after you started working at LucasArts?
You know, it's funny. I remember my interview at LucasArts, when you're interviewing for a game studio, it's usually like a quite long process. They flew me all the way out from Philadelphia to San Francisco to have a full day of interview and conversation with them. And I remember I got into the audio director, Dara O'Farrell, who's also the voice director for like pretty much every Star Wars. And I remember he asked me like, "So, you big Star Wars fan?" And I was honest. I was like, you know what? I gotta be truthful. No. I was more into Indiana Jones as far as the movies are concerned, but at that point I already had a pretty much encyclopedic knowledge of every piece of released Star Wars music. And the reason why was because all throughout college, I was like a John Williams and Igor Stravinsky fanatic, and like almost every day I would study something from Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and eventually Minority Report, which
Minority
at the time were my four
so
favorite.
Good.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable score and very different from what he normally does, but it shows his range. And I did tons of transcriptions of the pieces. Well, I would improvise on top of some of the the orchestrations that he had done, just to sort of get my head into that style of counterpoint, very dense and interesting, lots of stuff going on at the same time, kind of thing. And I obviously was studying the Igor Stravinsky scores as well, like Rite of Spring in particular, which was a huge influence on John Williams's work. I think by the time that, it was 4 years out of college, and then I had that interview, I pretty much already built up a very close relationship with the music of Star Wars. Not necessarily the story or the, whatever. I mean, I'd seen every movie up until then. So I guess by that time we'd had all of the prequels. We must have had all the prequels.
Yeah, they were out by 2003, right?
Yeah.
No, 2005. They were done by 2005.
Yeah. I saved my ticket for Star Wars EP3 for like 15 years.
Yeah, such a good one.
Just carried it with me because I was like, there's something, this is going to be special.
Yeah.
And save this. And I did love that movie. That was actually my favorite, easily my favorite of the prequels, and only like Empire just barely beat it as my like absolute favorite Star Wars film for a long, long time.
Nice.
But that was kind of my history with the Star Wars movies, and it was quite a learning experience coming into LucasArts and having to actually know Star Wars lore, realize that Kashyyyk does in fact have 3 Ys and it's not a typo, things like that. That if you aren't intimately aware of Star Wars, then you probably wouldn't know, the massive of these things. Yeah.
So did working at LucasArts like help you become a bigger fan because you kind of understood like things more, or is it still like, like?
I definitely love Star Wars a lot more now that I've, dug into it. I had this great opportunity. One of the things that's working in-house at a game company, you kind of have to learn how to manage your time, and you're going to have these waves where sometimes you're like super busy, and then other times it's like, you're not really doing that much, and you have to understand how do you use that time to your advantage. And I took that opportunity to do two sort of encyclopedia projects where for Indiana Jones and for Star Wars, I cataloged every single piece of music, every reference to any theme in every last one of them in like a giant spreadsheet. And then eventually I found, I collaborated with a programmer to actually bake this intro into the WAV files themselves.
Oh, wow.
So that at any time you could just search like, hey, I need C-3PO's theme. And then it just spits out every single reference to C-3PO's theme in the entirety of all of Star Wars. Things like that. And part of
So you were doing this before Frank Lehman published his massive encyclopedia that he has online.
I'm so glad he did that, because unfortunately, once LucasArts shut down, they just eradicated everything. And they lost this, and it would have been they just nuked everything, and it would have been so helpful on Vader Immortal. This may be a later topic, but the way I scored that was we started off by doing a music edit pass, where basically I temped the whole game, but with music from the movies, and having only the Muggle versions of all of the Star Wars music, and not the real actual scores, and having this searchable database was such a pain. I mean, I could have gotten that done in 2 seconds flat, but it took forever doing it the hard way. Yeah. But nonetheless, what I was saying was that we had the scores, all of the written out orchestral scores to all the Star Wars movies, and I think most of Indiana Jones as well. So I got to watch the movies, on my little PC at Lucas, read along with the score and take notes and do whatever I wanted. I mean, it was a dream come true for a couple months as I was chipping away at that project.
Wow.
And really getting to just understand exactly how Star Wars works.
That's so amazing.
It's really cool. Yeah, LucasArts was around for a very interesting period of time, and they produced a lot in that period of time, so much. But what was it like working there? I mean, from your experience.
Yeah, it was awe-inspiring, from the start to the end. I mean, obviously, you work any job, there's going to be highs and lows, right? But, every day you come in and you see, the Yoda fountain or, this gorgeous artwork around all the halls, and you're working on games that are going to be played by millions and millions of people. You'd be taken aback every once in a while, and it never. I don't think I ever really took it for granted. There were times where I was like, man, I wish that I had the freedom of being a freelancer. I wish I had that sort of drive. Because I was getting a little worried around my 4th or 5th year of oh no, am I losing my edge? Am I losing my ability to write in stuff that's not just Star Wars all the time, and all that kind of silliness. But still, it was such a incredible privilege, and being around such amazing some of the best sound designers I have ever worked with, which thankfully one of them he's actually the guy who brought me on for Vader Immortal, Paul Stoughton.
Yeah, I saw that in the interview that you gave. He was the one who kind of grabbed you and said, he's got to work on this. Absolutely.
He was our sound designer for Star Wars First Assault, and just absurdly, preposterously brilliant sound designer. And he eventually worked for Microsoft after LucasArts ended, and then he came back down to work at Skywalker, where he is now.
I'm trying to think if I met him, Paul Staunton. I was at Skywalker Ranch in 2018 for the Sundance Lab, and I made it my mission to meet everybody who had worked on anything Star Wars and just sit and bother them and ask them questions. I think that I probably met him. I don't think I got to sit down with him, but I probably met him. If I saw a photo of him, I'd probably be like, "Oh yeah, Paul."
Yeah, he's super cool. He's one of those guys who it's not only are they doing the sound design, okay, yeah, the way everyone else does, that's great and stuff, but then he's creating things, physically, making synthesizers out of stuff.
That's so cool.
I remember a week into, he was hired fairly late in LucasArts. He might have actually been our final hire before it all went down, but I remember a week into his job, we didn't have a full office for him, so we kind of put him in Studio B or something like that, a small room. And I go in to ask him some question or whatever, and I walk in, and there's all of these gadgets and just all kinds of random stuff that I'd never seen before. And I was like, okay, you're gonna have to explain half of this stuff. And he's like, oh no, it's so cool, check this out. And it's just unbelievably creative. And I really loved, he was one of those people who, and this is what I loved about working in-house, is that when you're surrounded by so much talent, maybe you're not really necessarily doing the same thing, but it just kind of, you want to up your game. You want to be okay, well, I can't I can't just sit here and do, the minimum required with music when like the environment art is so beautiful and the characters are, so well done. And then the sound design is so incredibly realistic and everything is coming together so well. And everyone kind of pushes each other to do better and better. That's really one of the privileges. Like one of my favorite moments at LucasArts actually was working on the trailers for The Old Republic.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't really write a lot of original music or really any. It was more of like music editing. But I think they pretty much just mobilized the entire audio team to work on these. So it was all internally done. We had Blur Studios do the visuals, but then internally the audio was just our LucasArts audio team. And it was just so cool, like these Mission Impossible style meetings we'd have with the marketing directors who were all brilliant, and then the audio team. And we'd all kind of use our own different kung fu to make this into something really, really cool. Those are weirdly enough, those are actually some of my favorite memories of working at LucasArts.
So cool.
That's awesome. Christy, do you want to go into what is your process a little bit?
Yeah, I was just thinking, this interview on Obelisk I found where you mentioned that Paul had wanted you to come in for Vader Immortal. And you said in this interview that for this episode of Vader Immortal, you actually did do a score that is much more Williamsy, more straightforward Star Wars. And since you weren't necessarily allowed to use any of the John Williams themes, you had to come up for your own replacements. For example, for the Imperial March, for whenever somebody's using the Force. I'd love to hear kind of about your process of how you went around coming up with your take on iconic moments like this and how you kind of conceptualize that.
Yeah, it's funny. It was not terribly easy.
I'm sure it wasn't.
Big shoes to fill, right? And then the funny thing is that, we're using characters from the movies, right? This is not like a side story or anything. This is like straight up Darth Vader is walking in very slowly. Now what? And it's like, well, everyone knows the Imperial March, but this is, I think, the first, perhaps the only Star Wars game where I wasn't allowed to use any of the film themes. So it was like, well, how do you deal with that? And it kind of varied. I think actually, oddly enough, doing the Imperial sound was relatively easy because all I really did was I kind of underscored Vader's approach, in that first moment where you see him and he's kind of walking towards you. And that was basically just, I just heard some harmonies and I was like, okay, this is kind of how it goes. And I just sort of wrote music, but then I kind of looked at what I had written and I was like, oh, actually I can make a theme out of this. And then I started reusing that in other pieces throughout the game. It wasn't really scored linearly, by the way, because different cutscenes were finished at different times. I think Ben and his team, they had their way of scheduling, which I don't really understand, but things just kind of came to me in whichever order they came to me. And so that's how I approached the scoring. But yeah, I got that and then I did my thing and then realized like, oh yeah, I've reused this theme and then turned it into an actual, theme. Yeah. The hard part was actually working on the Korvaxian theme.
Oh, that was so cool.
There's this, there's this one moment that we knew was going to be in the game from the very start where you're taking this very slow ride on the skiff to reveal the Korvaxian homeworld fortress thing that the archaeologists had been working on. Yep. We knew about that from the very start, as well as the, like when Lady Korvax is sort of detailing the history of her planet, and then it's got the
powerful
art style
moment.
that's all crazy. Yeah. We knew about that from the start. It took me, and I'm not even exaggerating, like half a year to figure out what to do with that. And I was stressing every single day about it. I think I honestly don't remember. Maybe I was working on Destiny 2 or possibly Mortal Kombat at the time, but or actually both, because this project took surprisingly long. But I was stressing so hard. I was like, what do I do with this? And nothing, I had so many ideas, nothing really seemed to work until I realized Vader Immortal is a love story.
It is.
And that wasn't obvious at all at first. It was, obviously now you play it and it's like, of course it's a love story. You see Darth Vader, but it was so unobvious to me. But as soon as I kind of wrapped my head around that and realized that it's Vader trying to get. By the way, I actually haven't played episodes 2 and 3, so no spoilers, please, because I'm looking forward to it.
No.
Yeah, I only have PlayStation VR. That's the only VR I have. So I never got a chance
like
to.
when it drops, you're gonna be like, we're recording this ahead of when this episode is coming out, but
yeah,
when this drops, you're gonna be like, oh.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, it's good. It's so good, Will.
I gotta check it out, man. I have no idea what happens in 2 and 3, so I'm really looking forward to that. But
one of the things like that I love the most about it is how much the emotions of the music tie with sort of the high art of like even the walls. Like it's just like it just ties together so perfectly. It is such a cool story. I'm so excited for you to play it.
Yeah. It's just so weird, like that, the composer doesn't even know them.
Now, what you just said there about the fact that you say it was a slow ride on the skiff in the beginning?
Yeah, like we knew. I mean, it was weird. Like they readjusted the timing like a million times throughout the development of that ride. From you're escaping the stormtroopers and then you're getting to this archaeological site.
And you see Lady Korvax's castle, which is we have Vader's castle, which is this black monolithic castle on the sort of like obviously lava flow landscape, and underneath it is this beautiful white and golden roofed like very feminine castle, which was Lady Korvax's castle, and she kind of falls into the same trap that Vader did or Anakin did in the Clone Wars, and in the past, she fell into that trying to save her husband, Lord Korvax. She like cursed the planet basically with using the Bright Star.
So she turned it into the hell state.
Yeah, and actually,
exactly. Yeah,
there's some stuff which I won't share because Will doesn't know that. It's just it's so cool and Star Wars and healing.
What happened to me when I was listening to that cue, the skiff ride, Will was kind enough to give us some to listen to. There's a string line that you do that instantly gave me the vibes of R2 and 3PO escaping Princess Leia's ship. And they're in the escape pod, and they look through the window, and you can see, the battle here and the planet below. And this beautiful string line that you did in the beginning, I was like, I feel like I'm in something moving. Obviously I knew it was a skiff. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, we're going fast. But now that you said that it's moving slow, when I was listening to it, I felt like I was moving in something slowly and looking at something. Like, that's how well you did that. I don't have any context for this video game. I felt that movement through the music. And then the way that it's so evocative of his style, but it's not his style. It's not somebody doing an imitation. It's you, but it has orchestration that is evocative of it. Just the majestic brass, where the woodwinds and the harp are swirling, and then there's this lingering harmonic string line is the only thing there, and then that bell hits. The entire time I was just like, oh.
Oh, thank you so much. That's one of the reasons why I love writing for the orchestra so much, is that you can convey so many things with motion, with emotion, just with the textures and orchestrations that you're
You did it. You did it. I was in that skiff, moving slowly, not even realizing. I literally would be if I was in game playing that. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
So there's this moment that's like one of the most powerful moments, and spoiler alert for Christy, basically Vader is like meditating, and he's like kneeling in front of the thing to contact Padme, and you're kind of like looking in. Is that the meditation theme? I'm trying to, or was there music for that? I'm trying to remember that moment.
So what we did was I attempted with, I have no idea what it's called in like the released Star Wars scores, but in our internal like Lucasfilm thing, it's called like Palpatine's TV set or something. It's just like this weirdly named cue. But it's just like a very simple kind of drone, and then I think there's like this vocal thing that happens or something like that. And essentially,
like Vader has this moment where he sees Padme on the screen, and I think they used like literally Natalie Portman's like lines from or Revenge of the Sith. And sorry, spoiler, Will. And like he takes off his helmet and it's like so powerful, and then you like run away because you're scared, because you're like pee-peed on Vader. But like the love of that moment is paralleled with Lady Korvax's story so well in it, and so thank you for like bringing that out, especially in the music. That's so cool. Like
that's one of the dangers in it's funny, like the dichotomy between being like a game composer and like a film composer, and writing for games, it's all non-linear, and you have all of these considerations to make that are of a technical nature. And a lot of times it's more about like, well, just write something that's really cool, really hip and interesting and fun, and make it work with the technology. But something that I think film composers often have more experience with is those sorts of like very careful nuances, and really getting into the emotions of the characters and how do they feel and all of that. Which, because music is so nonlinear in games, you rarely have an opportunity to do that. So again, I feel very, very blessed that I was able to work on a title like this, which is like, it kind of operates somewhere in the middle between a film and a game.
Totally.
And you had those opportunities to really get into the characters and how they feel and emote with the music.
Oh,
amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. Christy, any other thoughts on process? Did you want to go into more of the themes?
Yeah, I want to ask that. I guess I will ask that now.
Okay.
I really also loved this when I was listening to the end credits, kind of starting out with a harp and string ostinato, really great theme on the brass. And then towards the end, at around 1 minute and 26 seconds, there's like a tiny little hint towards the Imperial theme. It's not the Imperial theme. It's not a statement of it. It's just a little melodic hint towards it. And the way that the orchestration is, it's like a very clever hint. I found as I was listening to it, so many moments like that where, again, it's not a direct statement. It's not a direct allusion to something, but it's just a very clever and smart way of using orchestration where the themes are new. They are your themes. They are unique to these characters in this project, but it's still evoking in the listener the feeling that you are in the world of Star Wars, the sandbox of Star Wars as created, as you are continuing this lineage. I'm not so much of a gamer. I mean, I obsessively played all the iterations of Legend of Zelda, but mostly because I just liked to get on the horse and ride around, and like I liked to go into the market and like go to the inn and sleep and wake up. Like I played video games purely as escape and just having fun. Yeah. But I would really be genuinely interested in playing this because of all of those moments, and I'd love to see like how they all line up. And for me, as somebody who's never composed anything for video games, I'm so curious about the difference between the intro music or the stuff that the background music and then the action music. Like, how does that all function, and how does that all work with the themes that you've built? And it seems like it's so much more of a detailed process. It seems like it's I don't even know how you begin approaching that. Like some of the, I know I'm skipping ahead, but the Old Republic stuff too, there are different types of music for each location. Like it seems like so daunting almost.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer than yes. It is quite difficult. Thank you for noticing.
Yes.
No, I mean, so for Vader Immortal, we knew that, like, just from the get-go, we knew that, hey, ILM and Lucas are taking this very seriously, and they're going to take their time with getting the cinematic scenes, like, exactly how they want. And they had to, because they had, an all-star cast performing it, and you only really get one. When you're working with, like, Maya Rudolph, I'm sure you really only get one chance. You can't, like, hey, Maya, we screwed up. Can you come back? Like, you can't really do that. But so I knew that a lot of the cinematic moments were going to come later, but there were pieces of like interactive like action that I could pretty much score right away. So I said, okay, well, how about we wait on most of the cinematic stuff and the action that's really closely tied to that. Let's wait on that. And as soon as it makes sense, I can write an action piece or a puzzle piece or suspense piece or whatever. That's more of like the video gamey side of things. Mm-hmm. So actually, the first piece that I wrote for the game, I believe, you're in jail. Vader and the general, whatever his name is, they've left, and you get that Hydra spanner tool, which you'll use to break out of jail. So that was the very first piece that I wrote for the game. And I knew, like, okay, this is just a fun little looping piece of puzzle music. So just kind of do that. I think I modeled it after something from Star Wars Episode 2, where Anakin is sneaking through the little camp and eventually finds his mom or something like that.
Okay, cool.
Just, a fun little piece. And then once I did that and some of the little non-looping things around it, then I moved on to some action piece or another. And so we just kind of did all of the game side stuff that doesn't really have to be perfectly timed to anything. Mm-hmm. It's just, hey, just do stuff.
It's as the player is playing, yeah.
Exactly. And it'll just loop constantly. Once we had all of the game side stuff where it's just going to be looped anyway, you don't have to worry about specific timing. Then as it became appropriate, I would take on the cinematic moments that did have to be timed specifically to actions or lines of dialogue and that sort of thing. And I had a really great audio director, Kevin Bolin, who I'm pretty sure he was the one who timed all of my music to the scenes and made sure that everything worked really beautifully with the mix. And that was almost kind of a dream come true, because I didn't really have to worry about any of that. A lot of people ask me, like, oh, what was it like writing for VR? Like, what were the specific... There were no challenges that are any different from writing from a regular video game. And it was all because of Kevin and Paul and that team that just made sure it was as streamlined as possible. Again, I can't praise the Skywalker team enough for doing such an incredible job with this game.
Cool.
Now, a word from our sponsor. Do you love movies? The good ones? Even the bad ones everyone told you not to like? It sounds like Super Yaki is the place for you. The team at Super Yaki loves movies, so much so that they've dedicated every waking moment of their life to bring you top quality merchandise to showcase your love of them. From super soft t-shirts advocating for the immediate production of a third national treasure, to comfy sweatshirts celebrating Rian Johnson's triumphant whodunit Knives Out. They even have pins of some of your favorite directors like Sofia Coppola and Jordan Peele. Super Yaki joyously brings you tangible love letters to movies and filmmakers that you can wear with pride. Plus, the team at Super Yaki screen prints all of their apparel using eco-friendly 100% water-based inks and ships with compostable poly mailers for an environmentally friendly alternative to online shopping. And as a special gift to you, listeners can save 10% on their order with the code SUPERFRIEND, all caps, no spaces, at checkout. If the spirit moves you, find them at superyaki.com. Let's watch more movies. And we're back. Yeah, I just want to shout out. I really love when you fall into the planet and it feels like you're kind of or being pulled into the planet. It feels like you're going into a fantasy. You're going into the beginning of a new story. It literally sounds like that, and I love that in the music. So also thank you for that. There's that's like a swirling almost in the music, and it sounds so good.
One of the weird things about composition is oftentimes thank goodness that guy stopped. But oftentimes you'll see the visuals and you'll know in this very hazy cloud of texture what you want generally, but the actual notes aren't quite there yet. And I saw that scene really early on. And I knew I wanted a reference to the Korvaxian theme, but I hadn't written it yet. And I wouldn't write it for 6 months or something. So it was just in the back of my mind, like, I know exactly what has to happen. I just don't know what the notes are going to be. And I'm sure that, like, so one of my weird quirks is that I have music sketch paper, like, everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Every room in my apartment and in my pocket when I'm, going outside. Literally, even in, like, the shower, I have waterproof Post-it notes. And I'm like 90% positive that the Korvaxian theme was literally written in the shower. One day I was like, Eureka! And then I sketched it.
Thank goodness you had it. Like, that's really, really smart.
Yeah. And then, I wait for the Post-it to dry off and then come back into my studio and actually write the thing. But yeah, I was so happy when I finally came up with that. You don't understand how much of a relief, because I literally thought this was just going to be a career-ending failure that I couldn't.
You couldn't get that theme, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even. I mean, it's all right, but it's not like, looking back on it, it's not this earth-shattering revelation of melody or anything like that. It's just that the direction is so important, and taking that shift from, like, oh, this is a tragic land, or this is like a military whatever, or this is this character, and realizing, no, it's none of that. It's a love story. That's all it is. Once I sort of realized that, then it was like, oh yeah, it's actually fairly obvious. And then it kind of all went from there.
And the theme itself, it's very durable. Like, when I'm listening to that piece, the Korvaxian Droids piece, the way that you took that melody and it's going here, boom, 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 it's going here, it's changing rhythmically, it's changing in the instrumentation. Like, it's a very good, solid theme for you to be able to do what you ended up doing with it. Putting it all throughout the score and having it come back and hearing it all these different ways. So it's an amazing and brilliant melody because you're able to do that throughout. So I can, it's robust. That's what I meant.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's sort of the way that the whole leitmotif concept works, is you have to write these themes that almost have like a simplicity to them, that they can easily be reduced and manipulated into all these different.
And achieving that is harder than one expects. I just wrote an essay for Marie Claire's website, where I read that interview that John Williams recently did for The New Yorker, where he talks about his process for writing themes and saying that it's actually one of the hardest parts of anything that he does. And, they have to be this long and they have to accomplish this by this amount of time. And when you break it down, like
Alex Ross, right?
Alex Ross interviewed him. Yeah, he always gets the best interviews out of him. And that's kind of the way that I framed my essay, was that everything about Star Wars can both be taken directly, literally, simplistically, and it can also be studied for a lifetime. And it can be viewed both ways at the same time, or you can choose one or the other. But the things that work the best are the things that work on both levels. Yeah. So absolutely. I think that applies to your music so much as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I just jotted this down. I didn't even know about that interview, but I'm like a huge John Williams fanboy, as you might imagine.
You're going to love this too, because I don't want to spoil it for you, because it's the way it reads is so amazing, but he gets a gift in this interview, and his reaction to it is really amazing. So I can't wait.
It's very funny. we had a good chuckle about it on Twitter.
But yeah, man, thematic writing, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I try to incorporate that in as many of my scores as I possibly can. So there's like a yearly conference called the Game Developers Conference, which, of course, this year we had to do it online, but I just did a lecture on leitmotif in games, and then focused on my Mortal Kombat 11 score, where I think I had like 30 different leitmotifs, like one for every single character and every faction in the game. And it was all a game of like playing with all of these and writing them in a way that any leitmotif can actually counterpoint with any other one.
Like with any battle matchup.
Well, actually, the reason why... So I didn't do the in-game score. I did the cinematic score. There was like a 4-hour cinematic mode. And the reason why I did it that way is oftentimes a character might be manipulated by another character. And so I would hint at one theme while playing the other, or things like that. And so they had to be very extremely, what's the word? Like primitive, I guess, and easily malleable, so that you could work with them, and then also recognizable. So for that score, I didn't really have the luxury of just only doing orchestra like with Star Wars, because there was so much going on that it didn't really work out that way. And so instead, the orchestra is just kind of like the backbone, but really all of these themes are on world instruments or like synthesizers or all these different sound sources that you might not expect. Just so that it would be really easy to hear like a guzheng and immediately think, oh, Raiden, or, hear this instrument and immediately realize like, oh, that's Kano and all that kind of thing.
That is so cool.
That's really interesting, because many times in Star Wars, and John Williams, like, he tends to lean into certain instruments being applied to certain characters. And it seems like you've kind of picked that up with your other compositional work.
Yeah, I mean, as far as... I can't. Are you thinking of a theme in particular? Where he's tied an
Jabba the Hutt is associated with the tuba. Leia is associated with the flute.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Rey goes from flute to horns the more she progresses,
Isn't there oboe in Kylo's
love
theme?
and in love themes they use
in Love's themes
I mean that definitely, especially with the Jabba and the tuba. I mean, my impression with the way John Williams does it for Star Wars is it wasn't necessarily like the instrument, but it was more just the vibe that the instrument gives. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't an exclusive thing. Let's put it that way. Like, he'll use oboes elsewhere. Yeah. Whereas in what I was doing with Mortal Kombat, it had to be a little bit exclusive, just so that it would be, because there's so many, it's ridiculous numbers of characters. I mean, I had a giant Excel spreadsheet just to keep track of all of these character themes and all their, like, hundreds and hundreds of cells long. But in Star Wars, it's more about, like, honestly, and I'll tell you this, like, the only restriction that I think we ever really had with Star Wars was the piano. For some reason, you're only allowed to use the piano on Hoth. I don't know.
The piano stood out to me really... in the parts on Hoth. Like, I was listening to the way that you used it, and by using it in the upper register with the celeste and kind of these like shivering harmonic strings, you absolutely evoke the cold atmosphere by using it up there.
I'm wondering if that's still a hard
I felt that
rule. I don't know if I've heard the piano.
I don't like. It's weird. Like, there's rules, but then there's rules. You know what I mean? Like, but that was one of the.
That's so.
I think I remember trying to have piano in somewhere else, and it was like, you can't really do that.
That there's only pianos on Hoth.
Are there any other rules that we need to be aware of for?
No Latin.
They're not allowed to use
extant languages.
Latin.
Yeah,
okay. But Sanskrit,
I mean, it's weird. Sanskrit's fine, but for some reason,
that's fair game.
No Latin.
So what?
Yeah, we ran up against that too.
There's enough Latin nerds out there. They just don't want them translating it that quick.
Yeah,
I guess. I mean, I don't even know if John Williams made that conscious decision, or it was just like, he's probably just sick and tired of hearing so many like Dominus. You know, it's just. It was like, let's not do that. You know.
So what language are they speaking in your Old Republic piece that we listened to with the big choir?
So that's the Epic of Gilgamesh. Just some random passages and stuff. But not really. It's just, no, don't be impressed. It's just, sometimes I would even just take syllables, and it's very Hollywood composer watered down. It's not really. Okay. I just liked the sound, basically.
Yeah, it sounds really cool.
I'll pull back me being impressed just to a base level.
Her mythical
impressed.
Stuff is like, woo!
I was like, oh, cool. Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Calm down.
It's meaningless, basically. It's just a couple lines from it that I just thought sounded cool.
That music actually made me feel like old school Hollywood, like biblical Roman epics, like huge, big production, like that. It put me in that vibe of like historical epics. And once again, that fits perfectly with the fact that it is the Old Republic, and it is this other time in the full flower of being the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. Like it fits that whole vibe so well. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I wish I could say that was intentional, but if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I think I wrote that on like an airplane flight. I don't know where I was coming from.
So what we're learning about you, Will, is that literally anywhere.
It can strike anywhere.
For composing.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, I think everyone is like, it's so hard to just tell yourself, oh yeah, I'm going to come in here 9 to 5. And during that specific period of time, I'm going to be creative. It's like,
it doesn't work that way at all.
You know, you might hear an obnoxious bird outside, but they happen to do an interesting melody. So you're like, well, that's mine now, and I'm not giving you any royalties because you're annoying. And then now you've just written the theme to, you know, whomever. So
yeah, I find that I also work as an in-house composer, and one of the things that I at a production music catalog. One of the things that I have to do every day is I like you said, I can't just assume that after I've had my coffee and I've set up for the day that something is going to happen. I have to kind of exist in that mind space, but there's still certain things that have to get done. And so, like you mentioned, taking what you know you can do right now, breaking it down, taking something that you don't necessarily need to wait for this element. You can do this part of it now. That's kind of how I started, as well as saying, there has to be some baseline level of me being able to sit down and do something right now. It might not be the key to the puzzle. It might not be my Korvaxian theme yet, but it will be something that will assist me to continue. So having that baseline level of trying to stay open to everything and open to anything you hear or see as being a potential inspiration, that's to live life as an artist. That's to live life as a sensitive person trying to take what you see and what you feel from the world and translate it into art that's going to help people and inspire them. So
when you're working with melody, how do you usually get started then? I
basically can only write anything when I'm picturing a story and telling a story and thinking of a very specific character. So I'm working on an album right now that is just strings in the style, like kind of like the Moonlight score, kind of this neoclassical type thing that has become very popular in a lot of different film and TV usages. So I have a whole story behind this album. No one's ever going to know about it. No one's ever going to care about it. This is not a film that's going to happen. Do I have a vision board with actors I've cast as the roles? Yes. Do I have a plot of what happens? Yes. Is every track on the album corresponding with the different and very dramatic thing that happens? Yes. So I'm writing themes from the point of this is this character's theme, and I'm building melodies in such a way where I play maybe 5 or 6 things and have to cancel them because they sound too much like something I've already written or something that somebody else has written. And then I work from there, finding something that is actually original and my own and working well for the concept of the album. So
when you're developing these themes, do you find yourself like just iterating like crazy on like every possible permutation to get it to like exactly?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're probably like me, where you just seem like a crazy person walking through your apartment, humming and just moving things like 1/8 note this way and all.
And running to the piano and going, well, what about this? No, and walking away from the piano and everyone's eating dinner. Like, okay, can we continue? Yes.
There's this great. So we were in London recording Star Wars Connect. I think it was Gordy Habb and Kyle Newmaster's score. And when we were there at the evening for the mixing session, we're mixing, and obviously London Symphony played unbelievably difficult but ridiculously well-written music, and they absolutely nailed it. So the mix session was like pretty easy. It was just like, sit back, have fun, enjoy Gordy and Kyle's amazing scores. And we were taking a little break because, ear fatigue. And one of them showed us this sketch by this sketch troupe called Whitest Kids You Know, where it's like how John Williams actually acts in his like real life situation. It was very silly, very odd, and a little bit raunchy. But the funny part about it was that as he's going about his day, doing regular everyday stuff, mowing the lawn, brushing his teeth, all that, he's just humming.
Yeah.
But in like the most John Williams, like bum 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 bum, that kind of stuff. The whole time. And his whole family is getting so frustrated and annoyed with him the whole time. And it was, we watched the sketch, we laughed, we're like, ha 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 ha. But then we went back to work, and the next piece, some action number, and it sounded exactly like that. It sounded exactly like the silly John Williams song. It was so funny. We just had to take another break. We're like, we can't work like that.
I need to look up that skit. I want to see it. That sounds hilarious.
Just Whitest Kids John Williams. You'll find it. It's so good.
That's amazing.
Tweet that out later and see.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you're organizing production albums that way with like your own story and your own like setting and character themes and that.
Yeah, because I don't know how it's going to be used. I don't know what permutation I'll find out on my statement months later, but it could go anywhere. It could go nowhere. It's really a function of just how can I get the best thing out of it when I have a brief of references that are just supposed to kind of be in this world. And I need to take them and translate them and make them something new that still appeals to what made people respond to those in the first place. So I kind of need to go deep into the inner world to come up with that stuff.
That's such a great way to like just make sure everything gels together and has an inspiration to it.
Yeah, it's like a little mini short film or a mini feature film.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Like one of my favorite composers in the world, perhaps absolute favorite, is a Japanese anime composer called Yoko Kanno.
Oh,
she's so you know, she's unbelievable. Yes. And this is like a long project, but I actually did an anime album, which is sort of similar to what you're describing in that, like, I created a story just in the back of, you know, my head, and I'd already written a bunch of different pieces that were somewhere between model composition and like my own thing, where they were just sort of these very Yoko Kanno and Joe Hisaishi inspired pieces of anime music, but they were just individual pieces. They weren't really for anything. And then one day I was like, I should release these as an album. And so I wrote a few more and then created the story to graph them all together. And then I had some artists to illustrate different scenes from the story to be like the album artwork. And it's one of the most gratifying projects I've ever done.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it was really,
I want to check
really
that
fun.
out. I think that we should talk about Yoko Kanno when we talk about female composers, MC. We should definitely
we should
delve into her.
We're going to do a segment or a show once I get through this busy time of summer where we're actually going to do a couple of focuses on female composers, just so that...
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
We want to encourage Star Wars to hire women.
Yeah. Can I put in, I don't mean to intrude, but can I put in some suggestions?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a chance, definitely please talk to Sarah Schachner. She's done Call of Duty Modern Warfare and like a bunch of Assassin's Creed scores.
Yeah, my husband has played the Assassin's Creed one that she did, the Egyptian one.
Yeah.
And he's like, this music's amazing.
It's super good, yeah. And then from the other side of the Pacific, my favorite's Yoko Kanno, obviously, and then Yuka Kitamura, who did a lot of the Bloodborne score. Absolutely fantastic. She has this way of harmony where she just kind of dives into the atonal realm while still being a tonal piece of music. She's a violinist herself, and so she sometimes does a lot of sort of interesting effects on top of that. I think she did most, if not all, of Dark Souls 3.
Dark Souls, yeah. I'm just looking her up right now. I can see that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but her Bloodborne music is just so intense. If you ever want to hear the most terrifying G major chord you've ever heard in your entire life, listen to a piece called Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos. It is so brilliant and beautiful and terrifying, and I really love her music.
Ooh, okay. I put it on my to watch later list.
Absolutely,
the art is scaring me a little bit.
Yeah, it's scary, and the boss kills you in like one hit. It's super hard.
Okay.
But man, there's so much brilliant music that she has done, and Shimomura as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's most known for doing the original Street Fighter 2 themes, like the Guile's theme that everyone knows and all that.
Yeah.
But most recently, she's done Final Fantasy 15, I believe.
Oh, interesting.
Fantastic score for that as well. And I think she also does Kingdom Hearts. She must have worked on both of them at the same time, which is mind-boggling, but somehow she's made that happen. And there's so many just brilliant minds out there.
Isn't it so interesting that video game music is so much more, the doors are just thrown so much more open in video game music than it is in like the same 15 or 20 people who score every major film. Like, it feels as though there are people working in video game music right now, such as yourself, such as some of these people we've mentioned, who are just some of the most exciting composers coming up with stuff that is so fascinating and interesting and cool. Not saying that, the other people working on major films aren't, but there doesn't seem to be as much of a wall up for people who aren't the same group of people to be able to get hired onto these big titles and to be able to explore things musically. It feels like video game music has had a little bit more of an open mind this whole time.
Yeah, the Hollywood system, and I don't mean to criticize, of course, but like, it has a lot of elements of gatekeeping that are in some way there for a reason that's not entirely evil.
Right,
like,
right.
Like, for example, they definitely get better deals than we do for like their blockbuster kind of stuff. And it comes from years and decades of, like unions and trying to make sure that everyone in LA can support themselves. And I think that that's one of the reasons why a lot of the gatekeeping systems have come into place. So it's just one of those like morally gray things where it's like, well, I mean, you may have like, let's say some random Hollywood name. I'm not going to name anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Name, but, and they'll have their like huge room full of like composer assistants that are doing a lot of work. On the one hand, it's like, oh, that's kind of a bummer that, this, you might have someone taking credit for, whatever. But on the other hand, you now have a room of 30 people who are all working on an amazing title. So it's that weird. So, and then of course, now that they've worked on that, they'll get the experience, the knowledge, the know-how, and then they can hopefully do their own thing later on.
Be recommended for something, be given something that the lead composer doesn't have time for, stuff like that. Yeah,
absolutely. Or even just simply being in the room as someone from another department, let's say visual department or, whatever, who is also, starting their career and they're like the same age or the same, experience level or whatever. They just get along really well. And now they're working together.
Yes, they form a connection. Yeah,
exactly.
All that stuff is important.
Absolutely, and it's a real scene in LA because it's just the one city. Whereas games tend to be spread out over the world quite a lot, and then a lot of people work remotely anyway.
There's different housing locations like Seattle and Vancouver, and everything over in Asia, of course. But there's just like. It's not just LA where movies are made,
Yeah, it naturally lends itself to having more of an openness and more of a worldly feel in terms of who's working on all of these games. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And that, one of the things that so I'm on the board of directors of an organization. I'm sorry, I had to pitch that.
Do it.
An organization called the Game Audio Network Guild.
Oh yeah.
And, contingent, like when they asked me like, would you like to be on the board, I said the only reason or the only way that I'll join is if I get to try and increase our international presence, and specifically I have obviously the connection to Japan, and then of course Singapore with the LucasArts used to have a studio in Singapore, if that isn't widely known. So I have a lot of friends there who are now working at like Namco and Sony and whatnot. And I really wanted to bridge this gap that that I think is unfortunate that we have between the Western and the Eastern, because there's so much talent on both sides. And I'm just thinking like, well, why don't we work together? And honestly, one of my favorite scores in all of the PlayStation 4 was the aforementioned Bloodborne, because the way that score works is it was 3 Japanese composers and then 3 American composers all working together. And I just thought it was one of the most brilliant collaborations that I'd ever heard. Ghost of Tsushima as well. I cannot remember the names, and if I could, I would butcher them. But it was a Japanese composer who's worked on samurai films, and then I think English composer.
Ilanesh Carey, was that him?
Yeah. He's British, isn't he?
I think he is British. Yeah. I know that Austin just interviewed him about that, and I wanted to listen to it.
Fantastic. But yeah, and they worked together, and Ghost is probably one of the best scores out there right now, and it's just making these connections and taking advantage of the cultural impacts, how much impact that has on your music on every corner of the globe is, I think that's where the industry is going to go in the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say that there's like the world situation too, if we're going to talk about Hollywood, like it can open up because everyone can be remote. So
yeah,
there isn't really an excuse to necessarily have it all in Hollywood any longer. But we'll see what happens. We're going to certainly try our best to encourage people to take a look at alternative voices.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess my other question to piggyback off of this is, I'm sure people ask you this all the time, but if there was a composer who was, familiar with other forms and they're not a gamer. If a composer wanted to explore teaching themselves about game music and learning how to start, maybe just like practicing and trying it out, how would they start? Would they start, just playing games, or would they start just listening to game score?
I think playing the games is probably going to be a lot more of a learning experience. And then you can also kind of jot down how you think that the music is working. For example, like how the implementation is, like maybe you're walking around, right? And little bits and bobs of music are coming in and out, but then suddenly you get into a fight. And so music is now kicked up, and, the action music, and then the fight ends and something happens there. Taking note of that, and, maybe what instruments were used in order to drive this effect, and your opinion on how it's all working. I don't think just as I say with transcriptions, I don't think that having the right answer really matters, but what's more important is getting your impression of it so that then you could be influenced to do something creative later on that maybe we wouldn't have thought of before. And then in addition to that, if you just want experience writing for games, there's these things that happen frequently called game jams, where if you're unfamiliar, basically you're given like 2 days or maybe a week or whatever to do an entire game start to finish. And people assemble teams, worldwide to participate in this, and then it's like a competition.
That's so cool. I didn't know about this.
Oh yeah, and it's a fantastic way to do a full soundtrack in just a short amount of time. I think there's something that happens when you like complete something, like a complete full finished work of art or whatever, where you like level up a little bit. And doing these game jams is a great way to quickly do that. There was I don't think we do it anymore, but I had a group here in Seattle that we would do game jams with every year for about 5 years running, actually. And it's all people from like 343 and Bungie and Nintendo and these major companies. They have a lot of experience. And we would always do these horror games, but in completely different genres every time. And so the impetus on me was like, all right, well, I'm going to do a score, but it's going to be completely different every single time. Sometimes it'll be like Dead Space style horror. Sometimes it'll be Silent Hill style horror. In one case, it was actually much more a narrative game. And so I did almost like a neoclassical kind of sound that wasn't really scary. It was more like character building.
That's cool.
Character themes. And it's been one of the greatest learning experiences for me, doing just these completely different things every single time. The most recent was like game show music, because it was like an evil game show. So I had 2 days to do an entire big band game show theme suite with live players, by the way. We somehow pulled that off like last second.
Wow.
It was crazy.
So you're making sheet music too and getting all that ready.
Oh yeah, everything. Like I remember when it started, I went off to the local diner or whatever and had my pad and paper, and I just wrote the whole score while eating chicken and waffles or something, and then went home, found the players, which was really hard because, obviously, how many people can you just call up and say like, hey, can you record like saxophone and trumpet for me like now?
Evil big band music. Thank you.
Yeah,
evil game show.
We did. Yeah, exactly. And, we did it. And I think it was maybe 2 hours before church band practice started. And in that space of time, I had to write all of the horror music for the whole game. So I did the big band stuff, and then 2 hours to write every piece of horror music. And I just literally hit record on my on Reaper, which is my music program, and then went over to my synthesizers and just did whatever. Threw things together, chopped it up, edited it, sent it out, and hope for the best, and went to church. But that's what game jams are all about. It was just like, it doesn't have to be a great idea. It just has to be a now idea.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
It's a really, really good mentality to occasionally dive into.
Love that. Just made a quick note about that.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about your dream projects? What would you love to work on, both Star Wars or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this question and a little part of me was like, oh, because in a way I kind of already did my dream project.
That's so great, though.
Well, no, it's not, because it was actually Star Wars First Assault, which unfortunately,
right.
The story behind that was I joined the project about 2 years before the end of LucasArts. It had been going on for some time before that under different management, but it was a story where it was only a multiplayer game on like Xbox Live and PlayStation Network on the PS360 era. And the idea was we're only going to focus on the stormtroopers and the rebel soldiers. There's not going to be named characters, no Jedi, Sith, or anything like that. It's just going to be the conflict on the ground. It's going to be dark and realistic and gritty. And the idea was like, make Star Wars real.
Yeah.
And not this epic fantasy, whatever. And so what I did was I said, okay, well, let's have two different soundtracks. Let's have the Imperial score, which I modeled after Star Wars Episode 3. And because it had kind of a military vibe to it. But I gave it
a lot of marches in it.
Exactly, yeah. And I gave it like a heart. Like I have a lot of friends in the military and stuff. And I was like, well, sure, your army might, after all is said and done, you realize, oh yeah, we were like totally the bad guys. But you didn't know that when you signed up to be a stormtrooper. You were there because you were like, well, I have a sense of duty. I want to, spread peace. And, the propaganda of the time, of course, was that like, oh, these outer rim planets are, whatever. And so, yeah, that's why they joined the stormtrooper faction. It was a heroism for them. And so that's what my approach was.
I mean, Luke almost joined the academy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, exactly.
He wanted to follow Biggs. Biggs was off doing the right thing.
Yeah. And in my main theme for the Imperial side, it actually uses the Imperial March, but it's played in a major key to sort of show that, like, hey, yeah, this is the kind of music that they would have been blasting on the loudspeakers.
So, like we eventually got in Rebels and eventually got in Solo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not as familiar with Rebels, but I love the Solo score, and that's a sort of similar. I mean, it was a little more like earnest. Like this was not tongue in cheek at all. It was very heartfelt and real. And then on the Rebel side, the idea I had was like, well, these are people from every planet imaginable and different species, so much diversity. And so my thought was, well, war is reluctant to them. It just kind of showed up uninvited on their doorsteps, and they're so diverse. Why don't I take out all of the like expensive highfalutin instruments of the orchestras? There was no high woodwinds, no high brass, no French horns, none of that heroic kind of stuff. But instead it focused on the lower instruments, expanded low brass and low woodwinds, and uses a lot of world instruments on top of that, to show the sort of diversity of the faction.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And what's funny is I actually did a lot of research on not only world music, but also protest songs, particularly from the Vietnam era, because I'm American and that's sort of our, and I just tried to internalize that. It's funny, similar to the Korvaxian theme, it took me forever to figure out the Rebel theme. I mean, forever. Because I was just so inside my head, I guess. And then I literally remember the night, and I'd already written a bunch of Imperial music already, but I remember one night I was like in bed, it was like 2 a.m. and I woke up and I just grabbed a guitar and I just kind of started noodling. And that's the Rebel theme right there. I just started noodling on a guitar and started humming, and it was like, this is exactly what it needs to be.
Nice.
But it's that very simple kind of pentatonic. It's in the pentatonic mode because that's the most universal of modes across all cultures. And it just kind of went from there. And it was incredible working with all of the team. It was a small team, it was only like 50 people, but it was so great that everyone was so dedicated to the project. We had an amazing producer, an amazing, Jeff Morris was our producer, and I think he's still working on Star Wars stuff now. And Tim Longo, who eventually went off to work on Halo, but he was actually the project lead on Republic Commando. So there's a lot of that DNA in the project as well. We recorded the score with the London Symphony Orchestra at Abbey Road, which was absolute dream come true there. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the quality of musicianship is unbelievable. Wow. But unfortunately, the Disney thing happened, and pretty much, baby with the Batwater situation, and it's all kind of gone. But that really was a magical moment. I mean, one of my favorite times ever working on any game. And I didn't even mention the whole interactive music system. It's easily the most complicated and I thought the most successful interactive system I've ever designed. And it was my design along with some of the systems designers and the audio engineers, of course. We all collaborated on making this thing that worked so well with the multiplayer aspect that it would basically score itself. And I had playtesters coming into my office being like, I've just been in this firefight and my whole team was dead and I was the only one alive, and then I was crawling through this vent and the perfect music cue came in. How did you do that? How did you know that this was? And my answer was, I have no idea what played or why it played, or I have no idea. It's just the system just came up with this, and that's just how it worked.
So it was working on two levels for you. You weren't just super proud of the music that you created, but you were super proud of the functionality. And it was like everything had really come together on it for you. And I'll never not be proud of our team's work on that game. I think it's some of the best Star Wars that we've ever done as a studio.
Well, Will, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so happy to have had you on, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next. And also that I'm really, I don't know, I'm sad that First Assault didn't get made, but I hope that maybe you get to work on something else or you get to like add that unique flavor into.
Yeah, I want to hear that. Like now you've described it to us, and I'm like, I want to hear that. So
it's like
that's
describing a very delicious meal, and now we can't eat it.
We just get to smell a little bit. We don't get to eat. So
but that's okay. We're
it's life.
We're both looking forward to seeing what you do next and continuing to watch your career, because you're a rising star, and we're looking forward to seeing more from you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Where can people find you if they're looking for you online or looking for your work?
Sure, yeah. So on Twitter, I am at Wilbert Roget, and WILBERT ROGET. And then you can also just check out my site, rogetmusic.com. And if you'll afford me one more plug, I'm sorry, I have to.
Okay, go ahead.
My upcoming score that I am working on right now is called Anew, the Distant Light. It's an indie Metroidvania that's like 2.5D with a very unusual, but I think very brilliant art style. It's a game made by only 2 people, and then me doing the music. And it's one of the most unusual and unique scores I think I've ever written.
This looks amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the music is greatly influenced primarily by 20th century art music rather than film scoring. So lots of like Bartók, Debussy, Ratavara, and John Adams kind of influences in the scoring. Married with classic synthesizer, like 70s kind of analog synth stuff. So it's really a lot of fun to work on, and I've been chipping away at this project for about 3-4 years or so. So really looking forward to that one.
So it's
this.
Yeah,
cool. This is what we were talking about with our Mandalorian episodes, and talking about Ludwig and talking about like bringing these ideas. Like that's my dream project for you, Will, is for you to do like live action feature Star Wars films, like all of these ways that you're approaching your work and these things that you're bringing into it. Like I want to see you take that and do that on like the biggest like scale possible, like that's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
And Christy, where can people find you?
Also on Twitter, Christy_Carew. And I know last time I said I was going to have essays done on my blog. I really am almost done with some other ones, but also on Tumblr. Enjoy all, need nothing. That's the name of the Tumblr.
Thank you both.
Thanks, MC.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our Patreons, especially those who are obsessed and love What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Susan, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen, and Christian Luca. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps others find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at What the Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or at whattheforce.ca, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.